Oh my goodness. I'm not set up. What is happening? Oh, here. I'm set up. Can you hear me okay, everyone? Anyone? Well, there's like one person listening, right? Two people listening. There we go. Command Cyborg. I believe I saw Command Cyborg. Oh, yes. Command Cyborg gets to listen live, which is good. Anyway, JimBob did a little thing on me yesterday as a response to the short 5-minute video that I uploaded, and I thought it would be worth looking at. And I don't see any complaints yet. Hang on a second here. Yeah, okay. Anyway, hopefully you can hear the audio. I don't have Scott. Scott is like, I don't know what he's doing. He's slacking off, so he can't check my audio. So let me know if this works. Guys, can you hear me and can you hear this video? I'm going to the end of where JimBob had me on. Basically, I went through the video because there's a part to start with here. So
there you have Answers in Atheism. He's wondering, why is it that theists and creationists and Christians all alike are looking at the evolution story and going, forget creationism for a second. Let's forget the assumed either or for a second. There are atheists. They're not as loud. They're not as propped up, but they exist, who are going, this, Darwinian evolution. Something ain't jiving. It's not working. It's not mathematically working. We still don't have a mechanism that produces this effect called new apparatuses. I mean, think about how much they avoid high-resolution claims about biological appendages being created and formed.
Okay, so yes, there are atheists, religious people, nihilists, every other kind of philosopher that you can imagine that has doubts about evolution because they got maybe read a few paragraphs in high school about evolution and they say, oh God, this doesn't make sense, because they thought about, well, how did this happen and how did that happen? And yes, we all have those questions about how did this happen and how did that happen? Like appendages, for instance. How did appendages form? And he's claiming that, let's see if he doubles down here.
They never talk about it. They never.
Right. We never talk about it. I talk about it all the fucking time, or at least I try to talk about it. But when you try to talk to them about the mechanisms, they start talking about, oh, do you know what the scientific method is? And do you know what a theory is? And all of this bullshit. So you never get down to actually talking about how a snake fang evolved, or how a limb or a fin turned into a limb. And I have, yesterday I figured out I have 80,000 PDFs, most of those scientific papers. I don't know where the hell they all came from. But anyway, I have a whole folder on tetrapod limb development, right? And I think I downloaded like 10 papers on the evolution of the snake fang. JimBob, I think he gets into it a little bit here. Maybe it's in another part of the video, But let's listen to this.
They never approach it from a specific thing. Like, for instance, look, I'll bring something into play. Watch this.
Yeah, your average
Brought this up
atheist.
before in a different.
Come on.
The European, the green European woodpecker. Okay, their tongue. Let's see if I can find one that actually.
Oh fuck, the woodpecker. So we're gonna go pick the hardest thing to figure out, and we're gonna say, "Oh, evolution can't work because this stuff is difficult to figure out."
Okay, that tongue right there.
Yep,
that they just showed.
it's a great tongue.
That tongue in this specific woodpecker
Tongue's kind of sexy.
Like before the mandible, goes all the way around the skull, up through the bottom of the skull, and finally makes its way out of the beak. Okay, think about that. Can you visualize that? All the way around the skull, under the skull, through the opening hole of the esophagus, or whatever the bird's version of that is, out of the beak. Now, under the evolutionary story, there was a time where this animal didn't have this tongue, right? And if they say no, it had a tongue, it just wasn't like that. Okay, whatever that tongue was, there was a time it didn't have that, right? You know what I mean? You start to question when they refer to a specific organism. The organism is composed of all of these unique parts, but from their view, the parts didn't all develop at the same time. They developed at different times for different reasons, under different pressures, under their view. But that would mean that the unworkable tongue in...
No, JimBob, no. They didn't develop at different times. He doubles down and talks about the snake's fangs as if the glands that delivered the venom developed at one time, and then the fang developed at another time, and then sometime in the future the two came together and produced a snake that can bite you and inject toxins. That is not what evolution thinks. Okay, little changes happened along a pathway where every step of the way there was a function. The organism survived. Something worked in the organism, right? So it's not all at the same time. But in his mind, it's like Kent Hovind, his famous thing that, well, you know, the female frog formed, and then the male frog formed, and then they had to find each other. And it's just like everything happened to them in the way that they read about it in the Bible. So they're not thinking in terms of evolution. They're not thinking properly, right? Which is a problem.
This green European woodpecker, there was just a tongue growing around the brain for no reason. No reason at all.
Right, no reason at all.
Absolutely no reason. It just accidentally just grew around the skull. And the bird, having clearly enough time.
Here's an exercise for you. Go look up the evolution of the, what did I say? Evolution of the woodpecker's wraparound tongue, and just start reading, for God's sake.
Time in its own existence as a species to make it just quite fine without that tongue. So there was actually no reason to pursue the growth of the tongue around the skull and wait for it to emerge out the throat. Suddenly they have this lengthy tongue to stick into a tree and dig out some insects from deeper into the tree more effectively. No, because guess what? The amount of time that this bird that required for this tongue to fully form as it was in the image that you just saw, the amount of time that took, the bird had to have been doing just fine as well. You know what I mean? So there's not a reason why. It didn't do it because it needed to survive. It actually didn't need it at all. It's like a bonus. You know what I mean? It's like when you buy something on Amazon and the sender includes stickers. You didn't ask for stickers. You didn't need stickers. Can you use the stickers? Cool. Yeah, sure. We'll use the stickers. The tongue was used to lick its pineal gland. Yeah, obviously gesture's privilege. That's what it was doing for 4,000 million years before it finally made its way out of the mouth. Can you imagine this bird is doing just fine? And then the first stage of the tongue makes its way just kind of here. It just has a useless tongue that didn't make its way out of the beak yet, that just kind of lodged in its throat. It's kind of gagging all the time, you know? Populations of the green European woodpecker chatting to each other. You know, they're you know. Oh, was that a woodpecker? Did I hear a woodpecker? Yeah. No way this could have come out through evolution. I'm fine with that.
I think he may
Reptiles breathing hack helps. Look, they just call it a hack. This.
Okay, this is just some more bullshit about them picking the most complex thing that they can find and telling a stupid story about how they think it could have evolved, and has nothing to do with how evolution thinks about how these things evolved. And people have worked on each individual problem. Some people dedicate their entire life to limb development, or how fins turned into limbs and whatever. And if they want to hear the real story, they have to sit around and listen long enough for you to tell the story. And that's what they never do. They want to straw man us and make it sound ridiculous. But anyway, let's go back to the beginning of this bullshit. Let's see what we got here. Okay.
Super bagel face. No more. Yeah, I know. I can't eat. I thought I could. I honestly thought I could. I'm sorry, I can't. When you have to go to Mike from Answers in Atheism instead of someone else,
feel bad for him.
You know it's bad. Now let's switch over to evolution. So much more interesting than these ex-evangelical morons with no arguments. I think Meg Bob is here. Yeah, Meg Bob.
A denominational approach
Prune Square.
Well, let's see where he actually starts.
Which really could use its own tanks, if you know what I mean. It's old balls, yeah. It's old balls.
Old balls.
All right. Are you ready to hear what Old Balls has to say about evolution? I might have to do this at higher speed though. I'm starting to learn my lesson. I don't want to punish you guys. 1.25 maybe? Let's try that.
Hey, so I don't know if this is a good idea or not.
Probably not.
I don't know. Could call this morning bites, little tiny things. For instance, there are these creationist memes or structures that I would like to kind of detail.
Uh-huh.
Now, I think the first time I heard about creationism was probably in my 50s, late 50s.
Nemo says, JimBob, what's your elevator pitch on why one should question evolution? Well, I would start with a theory, right? I would say, what's a scientific theory? Most naturalists, most atheists, most people who just cling to evolution, they don't even know what a scientific theory is. I would start there. Nemo, I'd say, do you think evolution is a scientific theory? They say yes. I go, what's a scientific theory? They flub it almost every time. You ask them, can you have a scientific theory that isn't the tail end of the scientific method? They'll flub that as well. They'll say, of course. And so you just get them in first bound up in the technicality of what a scientific theory is and what it isn't. And then if they say it is a scientific theory and they know the scientific method, you actually can ask them to take you through the scientific method. Nemo, I don't know if you've been here, but I've done it multiple times with people who call in. They cannot get through me. And it's not even me. They can't take evolution through the scientific method.
Okay, so JimBob keeps coming up with this scientific method thing. So you can go to ChatGPT and you can ask it what the scientific method is. And the problem here is that JimBob probably took 7th grade science. I think he probably dropped out before 10th grade science or 9th grade science. I think they give you biology in 10th or 11th grade. Yeah, I don't think he took that class. But anyway, so he heard about the scientific method and they may talk a little bit about what a theory is in 7th grade science. I don't know. But this whole thing with the scientific method where he trips atheists up because they can't recite it. And then he starts reciting it. And I did it with him. And number one, okay, observation, you observe something about the natural world that you want to explain. For instance, you see certain species share common traits and that fossils show a progression of forms over time. And then he skips part 2 for some reason. I don't know. He goes right to part 3, experiment and testing. And I had a problem with that because part 2 is pretty important. You come up with a hypothesis about how something formed, right? And that may be what Charles Darwin did, because when Charles Darwin started, it was sort of a blank slate. The theory was not sketched in very well. Charles Darwin kind of had to start sketching for us. So he came up with a hypothesis about how the complexity of life that we have today exists, right? So that's step 2, the hypothesis. And then step 3 is where you start doing experiments. And Charles Darwin did a bunch of specimen collecting, and he, stuck them in little timelines and all of that. But since then, I think it's like, 150, 160 years, we have been adding to that story, basically. But no scientist sits down with a little cue card that says, here's the scientific method, and you got to use the scientific method. No, scientists are people who think about things, right? And it's just so stupid that he keeps going back to this 7th grade science bullshit, and wants to attack not evolution, but he's attacking atheists that he has on his panel. So you can try to trip them up and, they missed a part or whatever the hell it is. Anyway, experiment and testing. Well, we can't observe evolution over millions of years. We can test the hypothesis. Fossil records, genetics, experimental evolution, where we make changes to, say, the fruit fly and figure out what each gene does. And then the important part, analysis. Scientists analyze the data gathered from all this stuff. They look for patterns that confirm or refute the hypothesis. Now, you can't prove the hypothesis, but if you have a idea about a mechanism, for instance, mutations to the DNA when it copies, you can test that in current organisms and figure out, well, how many mutations are there? What is the rate of mutation? Where do the mutations happen? And from there, we get into a body of work that consists of millions of papers right now. I basically put all this together. This is what's worse. JimBob is, What do we got here? No, JB, I can't get through you means can't get through to you because you can't listen and understand, perhaps because of motivated misunderstanding. That's correct. His comprehension of evolution. Yeah, he knows nothing about evolution. He gets into it in this little 15 minutes that he spent on me, where he starts, he goes from evolution back to the Big Bang, of course, and then gets all confused with abiogenesis. And then he claims that we're trying to get out of something because we won't talk about abiogenesis when he wants to talk about, when he brings up evolution. Talking to him is a bitch, I tell you. You got to be careful because he gets into his pre-sup and interrogator mode and laughs at every answer to all of his stupid questions. I mean, you can only answer a stupid question in so many stupid ways. So anyway, so then conclusion of vast amount of evidence from different fields has led to a theory of evolution being widely accepted as the best explanation. And then he goes on to explain that we don't know what a theory is, right? Well, I don't think what a theory is a settled matter exactly. I mean, there's a lot of philosophy of science that gets into this. And to me, a theory is a huge body of evidence and detailed mechanisms and papers about potential mechanisms, tons of hypotheses, tons of experimental evidence to confirm or refute the hypotheses. And it all comes together in this massive thing that we call the theory of evolution. And when you start reading about evolution, you're never going to read the theory of evolution. So no human being is going to be able to get his mind around what the entire theory entails right now, right? You can only dive in, get an overall view, and then start getting into detailed structures. And getting into the details is the part that I love. So anyway, peer review and reproducibility. So then the other thing is that every time you publish a paper, every time you do an experiment, somebody comes along and looks at it from another angle and they'll criticize it and they'll refine it. And overall, a theory is like a moving target. It's a thing that keeps evolving. Theory of germ theory, right? You could write a little short blurb on what germ theory is, but that's not what germ theory is. Okay, it's not your short little description of the theory. You know, that germs cause diseases, right? That's germ theory. That's the whole theory. No, it ain't. The theory consists of all of the evidence, all of the experiments and papers that have been written about how germs cause disease and what germs are and how they operate and their genetics and all of that. So it's never this simple little one-line thing that the average person on the street would state. Theory of gravity is an interesting one. So we had Newtonian gravity, right? And it consisted of all mathematics, experiments, testing, figuring out gravity, and then Einstein comes along with theory of relativity, and we have a major revision to the theory. And it goes on, and they're still working on gravity waves and still trying to figure out what the hell gravity is. But anyway, so in a nutshell, the theory of evolution has been rigorously tested using the scientific method, making it one of the most robust and well-supported theories in science. And let's see. What is wrong with the evidence with saying that the evidence has to prove a hypothesis? It was a question I posed ChatGPT. So it's problematic because it misunderstands how the scientific method works. So every time JimBob uses the word prove, it means that he doesn't understand science at all. In science, hypotheses are supported by evidence, but they are rarely, if ever, proven in an absolute sense. And here are a few reasons why: falsifiability versus proof, scientific theories evolve, inductive reasoning, probabilistic nature of science, and all of that. And then you want to ask ChatGPT what a scientific theory is, because I don't know. I don't sit around and think about, oh, what is a theory every day when I open a book on molecular biology. I don't know why he keeps bringing this shit up. But it's a well-substantiated explanation of some aspect of the natural world that is based on a body of evidence and has been repeatedly confirmed through observation and experimentation. It is not a guess or a hunch, but rather a comprehensive framework that explains facts, integrates laws, predicts future observations. It's based on evidence, it's testable, it's falsifiable, it has predictive power, We have Tiktaalik is the most famous example of a prediction. Subject to is famous, but it's not the only example of a prediction. Subject to revision. The theory of evolution is constantly going all these twists and turns where we're taking different looks at this complex system that is life and how it established on the earth and how it proceeded to give us the complexity that we have today. And that is, there are probably a dozen different disciplines involved in this theory of complexity, all of molecular biology, genetics, paleontology, all of that. And it's widely accepted. So the fact that like 99% of all scientists accept evolution is pretty significant. And that's why we tend to call it a fact.
And just to extrapolate on that, observation, viable hypothesis. That means what's causing the observation? Experiment, scientific theory. They can't do it. None of them.
No, you can't do it. Wow.
It just never came onto my radar. I don't know why. I don't think it was talked about in the 1990s. It wasn't, well, of course, it wasn't on YouTube, so I didn't get much of it. But I've always asked, what the hell are these people talking about? I mean, like, they're making science and religion seem like they're equal, right? Like you have
Some people might do that. They're not.
you have the evidence, and you could either decide for science or you could decide for religion. It doesn't matter which. Both have equal support. But to a person who has never been exposed to science denial or religion, the whole stuff, like I've been a lifelong atheist, that seems batshit crazy because for a number of reasons. Anyway, why would they want to make evolution sound like a religion? Just a story.
Personally feel like says evolutionists can't get through because they need 50 million years. Yeah, well, here in this chat, it's 400,000 million years, according to Adam Green. Which, do you guys think I should do an annual review of Adam Green's evolution?
400 billion years? Is that what he said? 400,000 million? Yeah, 400 billion years. I don't know what he's talking about. Anybody know who Adam Green is? I just found him thanks to JimBob. I don't know. I think he's a science. Well, he's a neuroscientist. I think cognitive neuroscientist.
I think I should. I think it's something that just can get better every time. And the first one was epic, but I could see the thumbnail now. Reviewing Adam Green's, I called it Evolving Adam. Evolving Adam again.
What is he talking about, guys? Does anybody know about these Adam Green?
Christianity is a progressive religion and the originator of feminism? No, it's not. What are you talking about? I would love. What are you saying? Evolution is religion, just like when they try to say science can explain everything. Yeah, it's religion. We're using that colloquial. We're not saying they have a known being entity they worship and they go to church and they do it, but there's a variation of it. It's reflective, definitely, of a church system. Talked about this yesterday. I was on a guy who used to have a channel called 2-Bit Radio. He now changed his, and I'll post a link. We had a fun conversation. How there was a section in the conversation how people who kind of turn it around and head back toward Christ. Some of us, I was one of these people who saw that everywhere you looked was some type of counterfeit or inversion of a church system. That wherever you look, there's some sort of impulse toward a congregation. There's an impulse towards some sort of doctrine. There's an impulse towards some sort of sacraments or rituals. There's an impulse toward a notion of the good that you attempt to ground in something larger than yourself.
This is interesting. He's talking about basically everything is a church or everything is like a religious organization. And I think I mean, it's obvious that humans do that stuff, right? You know, we have hierarchies in our tribe. We have the leader, and then we have hierarchies in families. You know, we have the big dude and the smaller girl and whatever. I mean, this hierarchical thing and this bit about, you know, having a dogma, having stories, whatever, is pretty obviously a human trait, right? So he's claiming, but why call evolution a religion? I mean, you have a religion, right? And the word religion has always meant going to church and having a belief in some sort of deity and whatever. So why would you want to use that word and then claim that evolution is a religion? It's a rhetorical trick. It's meant to piss us off, to lower us down to their standards, basically, that we have this dogmatic book like the Bible. You know, we have Charles Darwin's Origin of the Species or whatever. And they keep doing it. And that is the problem. And JimBob kind of understands that it's not right to do that, but not completely.
These things, there's heresy, there's blasphemy, like there's all of these things that when you look out in the world, because the world is, as Peterson would accurately describe, hierarchical in nature, also necessity, and women are ontologic and fall into their proper place, their ordered scheme. Denying an ordered scheme itself is dysfunctional. It's a dysfunction.
Nobody does that.
And if there is a function, well, what justifies a function? What justifies that there is a specific kind of descriptive truth to the order of the universe, including social orders, that you can't escape because they're consistent with the whatness of the parts. And what I mean by that is the whatness. What is a man? What is a woman? What is a tree? What is a rock? These distinct categories and how they operate and what they can and can't do.
Oh, okay. So he's talking about justifying the order in the universe in order to think about evolution, which shows you how his mind works, basically. He always has to go back to God did it, God did it, God did it. It's the only way he can understand anything. He always has to go back to justification and the origin. And for the next couple of minutes, I think he goes off on a anti-trans rant for some reason. He managed it because transgender people are pretty rare in the world. And these Christians have 70% of their mind occupied by the fact of transgender people. And they just can't get away from it. But see how he does it.
The nature of them. The result of that, the entailment of it, the consequence, is that the world operates in a specific kind of way, and you can't expect it not to if you're a naturalist. But you also can't justify why it's that way. Why
do we have to justify how and why it's that way? Naturalism is about studying how nature works, how natural systems work, right? You don't have to justify that they do work. If they didn't work, you wouldn't be here talking to me. You wouldn't be talking about me. Nothing would be here if natural systems weren't ordered and they didn't like roll along with some regularity. Why do we have to justify it before we can talk about it? Now, that's an interesting little twist that the presuppositionalist does. The tag presuppositionalist, transcendental argument for God, that you can't even open your mouth until you justify everything and found everything down to some mythical foundation. And of course they have one, and it's called God. God did it. God did it. Okay, so we have one. You guys don't have one. And yeah, we do. The world is the way it is. It just is. Same thing as God did it. And he can't get that through his head, that is exactly the same thing, except naturalism doesn't add that one extra layer where there's a mythical explanation for why we have logic and regularity and particles and space-time and all of that stuff. He's confused.
And they'll use straw man things like you've seen a dog come from a cat, or cow come from a whale, or you're related to a banana. So they'll use these clever moves on word.
Jesus was the first anti-patriarchy. That's not true. Jesus under Christianity is literally the high priest of the church. That is patriarchal, Tanky Bach. Do I need to make retard sounds? I didn't want to do it. Someone in the comments said, please don't do the retard loop. A priest of the church. How could Jesus be a high priest and also
Christ.
but so what do you
icons and gods that they come up with, and that is to them science, right?
No, I mean, if someone did that, Answers in Atheism, Mike, I would argue with them that they're incorrect too.
Well, that's good.
What do you, I mean, come on, dude. Are you really this lazy at this point? You've been in my chat, Mike. You understand that when you say Christianity or creationist or whatever, you're including a bunch of people that don't agree on their Christian paradigms. And
Right. Christians can't. What are there? 35,000 different denominations, and they're all fighting, and even the creationists are fighting among themselves, and they fight with the ideas, and they fight with the theistic evolutionists, and yeah, it's kind of a mess, JimBob, and that should tell you something.
here you are saying, "No, I think that." What are you talking about, dude?
Oh,
The same
balls, gross.
Smooth balls.
exegesis, studying the Bible. Yeah.
Anti-YouTube, white, anti-white. I was like, why is the YT? I was like, why did you throw in YouTube trad? I get it. Anti-white trad. That's kind of a funny troll. That's definitely a troll, right? Patriarchy doesn't mean a male leader. What? Jesus was an egalitarian? No. What are you talking about?
Abraham needed.
Can I go back 10?
Actually, they're studying this whole story and they're trying to figure out what Abraham needed. How was Moses feeling? That sort of thing. They want to make that equivalent with scientists talking about evolution.
It's not equal in that way, no. When
Good.
old Mike, old
Good.
balls, when we say
Smooth
people
balls.
who believe in evolution are believing in a type of a religious belief, what we're saying when we make an analogy to creationism is there's a myth. There is an instance of the beginning of all things, an origin point. And evolution proponents don't want to tangle up with the problem of endless regress in the biological context, because they say, no, I'm not talking about abiogenesis. You have to grant me populations, and then we can debate evolution. We go, well, no, populations, under your view, would require a precedent process. So that would mean that
Basically, what we're telling them when we say, no, we're not going to talk about abiogenesis if you want to talk about evolution, what we're telling them is don't keep moving the fucking goalposts. I mean, if you want to hear about fin the limb or how snake fangs evolved or whatever, if you want to hear that particular hypothesis, then you can't suddenly start talking about, oh, well, how did the populations arrive in the first place? No, you have to pick a starting point. You have to plant your goalpost somewhere and then ask us to play the game, basically, and then ask us for the explanations. And here he goes back into the Big Bang, and it's just ridiculous. You can't talk to these people. You can't answer their questions because they won't let you get started without moving the fucking goalposts back 4.5 billion years, and then 8.8 billion years. That is why, JimBob, we like to plant our feet somewhere, right? So what I like to do, if you want to talk about evolution, I will grant that God created a huge population of single-celled eukaryotes in the ocean somewhere. This population. Now we can talk about evolution, because all of the mechanisms for evolution are in place at that point. The DNA replication and slight mutations and DNA repair and all of that is in place at that point. Now you can talk about anywhere from that point up to the present, and that is evolution. The shit before that is not the theory of evolution. It has nothing to do with the theory of evolution. Of course, we can go back before that point and start talking about abiogenesis, which is a different topic. He just can't. Well, the religious people don't want to get that because they like to run around with the goalposts.
That evolution, the same mechanism that you are arguing, once you have populations, the same mechanism had to produce populations, Mike.
No, that's not. That is where it goes wrong. No, the same mechanism wasn't responsible for abiogenesis. The formation of the first primordial cells was not the same mechanism as we have for evolution. I don't know why he thinks it has to be.
And so on and so on, and back and back and back and back to an origin point. That's why you can't argue evolution without confronting the problem of endless regress in the biological mechanistic system that you're arguing for. Yep.
So what he's saying is he's not going to listen to anybody talk about evolution until we can justify everything back to the beginning. And the only way to do that in contemporary science is the only way to come up with a solution for everything is to say God did it. Because we don't fucking know a lot of things about the universe and what there was around space-time and all of that. And so for them, they don't want to hear about evolution. They don't want to. He claims that we never talk about how limbs develop or how these mechanisms develop. No, that's not the case. We talk about it a lot. You never listen because you want to go right back all the way to the point where you can put your flag in the ground and say God did it. They don't want to listen.
You have to keep going back. That's why you don't like to. Because if you keep going back, guess what? You're at a point, where the earth needs to be formed. We say God created the universe and the earth and all of its contents. You say the earth formed from an ambiguous, long process.
No. What we say is that it's here. Okay, the cosmos is here. Okay, there are a whole bunch of hypotheses about beginnings and bubble universes and all of that stuff, but no, we don't need any of that talk about evolution.
From a singular point expanding outward, right? And that the moon was created by colliding with the earth, and a chunk of the earth fell off and became the moon. This is insane. This is a religious view. This is a myth. This is a creation myth. You just don't have persons.
They have supercomputers with models where they're showing this hypothesis about the moon being the result of a smaller planet colliding with us in, 4.3 billion years ago or something like that. And no, it isn't just a myth. It isn't just something that somebody made up. It's a hypothesis. And now we have to go and make predictions and find evidence for it. And that's why we're going to the moon and collecting samples and all of that bullshit.
It's involved. You just swap your characters in the myth with objects. That's all you're doing. That's what they do. And they think it's more reasonable because you're not inventing a person in their view. Oh, I don't need a person.
Right.
You just have objects do this thing. No, that's a myth. Can you
That's a myth. Basically, we're trying to figure out how the natural world as we see it today, how it works, right? We're trying to figure out how that created things like the moon and the oceans and all of that. And he's calling that a myth. But his deal about inventing a super being in the sky that did it all, that's not a myth? I don't understand.
imagine believing this as a story, old balls?
Imagine believing that there's a super being in the sky that just zapped everything into existence. Smooth balls. Imagine that. Somehow that's better than ideas that are based on physics and what we know about natural laws. He's claiming that that's the same as saying God did it. I don't know.
Oh,
By the way, I apologize. I'm not exactly on this morning. So I'm sort of, I'm not sure how much further I'm going to get here. I have to go shopping here with the ex in about 10 or 20 minutes, something like that. So I can't go too much further. But anyway, yeah, maybe I'll end it and get back to it at another point. Maybe, not likely. Let's do a little bit more.
balls, gross.
Imagine believing this description, right? Well, there was this
How much do I have to be in his head for him to have made that clip for me? It's interesting.
singular point before space, time, and matter had any references or objects. And from that single point, all matter was manifest violently in an expansive process in all directions.
Yeah.
And during that expansive process in all directions, which is ostensibly disordered, you long enough period of time, there was order. And guess what? There was the earth and it was formed, right? Okay, how was it formed? Well, gravity formed. Okay, great. Show me where
He doesn't believe in gravity.
gravity forms large objects ever. Doesn't even make sense.
Okay. I think they did it on this on the space station where they took what did they take? They took something that was they mixed up some water and they had particles in it, and eventually the particles all coalesced, basically. And I can't remember what the experiment was, but come on, JimBob. Gravity, if you have a little speck of dust in space and you got another speck of dust 1 foot away from it, those two specks of dust in pretty much empty space are going to come together because of gravity. It's just the way it works.
Sense. That's a myth. Okay. Granted, gravity formed an Earth, big cluster of matter.
Rocks. Yeah.
How was the moon formed? Well, it's funny you should ask.
Hang on a second.
The moon was formed when another large cluster, for some reason, hit the Earth really, really fast. Fast enough to break a chunk off of it. Now get this. These people believe that a large object hit what was then the Earth with such a fierce, forceful speed that it can break something off of the Earth that can become its own satellite cluster. And that force somehow was forceful enough to break the part, but also not strong enough to have what is now the moon sent off violently in one direction with no resistance in a vacuum of space.
Right. Two things collided, and they collided, and it just so happened that it wasn't going too fast or too slow. It was more of a Goldilocks kind of thing, where it just collided at, basically at the right speed. What is wrong with that? I mean, it happens all the time on the highways. Two cars collide. Sometimes they fly off in different directions. Sometimes they don't. They stick together. I mean, shit happens in the universe, right? And that's what he's complaining about, that it happened the way it happened. And when we look at the hypothesis, the moon hypothesis, basically we have it is a hypothesis, and we model it, and we try to figure out whether the model makes sense. I don't think he understands that there was a hell of a lot of shit flying around in the solar system 4.5 billion years ago. And his little mind can't handle thinking about what was actually going on. So maybe he thinks it's like today. I don't know. What do you think? Anyway, shit. I got to end this, guys. I got to go. I got a problem coming up. I was hoping Scott would join me because I am shit by myself, really. And I apologize for that. Your name is Adolf. Let me guess. What the fuck? I'm not sure. Anyway, there was the usual amount of bigotry tossed into this, usual amount of JimBob strawmanning evolution, which is the video that he's looking at, the little 5-minute blurb I did. It was about strawmanning evolution, and then JimBob looks at it and he goes ahead and strawmans evolution some more. So it really isn't. It's typical JimBob. But the amazing part, I forget where he did it, but he managed to go from naturalism to transgender, and he managed to put that in there and pepper his stuff for his racist, fucking sexist, asshole audience, his bigoted audience, right? He's got to play to that a little bit. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so I'm going to end this mess that is me trying to talk by myself. It was an experiment to find out if I could do it, and I failed. So anyway, okay, guys, I'm going to end the stream. So goodbye, cruel world.